The rain-soaked alley echoed with a desperate voice that cut through the night like a knife. Please don't hurt me. I can't walk. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and how did this story touch you? Now let's dive into the story. A woman in a torn white suit lay crumbling on the wet pavement, her ankle twisted at a terrible angle. Her hands clutched a laptop against her chest as if it held her very life. A dark figure loomed over her, fists clenched, moving closer with each passing second. The woman's natural hair hung loose around her face, mixed with rain and tears. She had nowhere to run, no way to escape. Death seemed certain in that dark, forgotten corner of Chicago. But then, footsteps approached from the other end of the alley. Would help arrive in time, or was this the end of everything she had fought for? Earlier that evening, Rachel Morgan had been a completely different person. As the CEO of one of Chicago's fastest-growing tech companies, she commanded respect wherever she went. Her office sat on the 40th floor of a glass tower. Important people answered her calls. Her name appeared in business magazines. She wore expensive clothes and lived in a penthouse that overlooked the entire city. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But perfection can be a prison. 4 months, Rachel had been engaged to David Grant, the chief financial officer of her own company. Their upcoming marriage wasn't about love. It was a business deal arranged by her father to merge power and secure control of millions of dollars. David had been pressuring Rachel to sign important papers that would give him control over her assets. She kept refusing. Tonight, he had locked the hotel room door and raised his voice. His hand had gripped her wrist too tightly. Something inside Rachel snapped like a breaking branch. She grabbed her laptop, the one containing proof of David's illegal activities, and ran. She didn't stop to grab her phone or her shoes. She just ran, her bare feet slapping against the cold hotel hallway tiles. She burst through the emergency exit and into the rainy Chicago night. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might explode. She had never been so terrified in her entire life. Rachel cut through dark streets she didn't recognize. Her expensive white suit became soaked and dirty. She could hear David's footsteps behind her, getting closer. In her panic, she turned into an alley, hoping to find another way out. But her foot caught on something. She fell hard onto the concrete. Pain shot through her ankle like lightning. When she tried to stand, her leg wouldn't hold her weight. The ankle was broken or badly sprained. David appeared at the alley's entrance, his shadow stretching across the walls. Rachel pressed herself against the cold brick wall, still holding the laptop. That's when the words escaped her lips. Please don't hurt me. I can't walk. Marcus Williams held his daughter Emma close as he walked through the rainy Chicago streets. The 6-year-old was wrapped in a faded yellow raincoat, her head resting against his shoulder. Marcus worked as a washing machine repairman, and his work boots were soaked from the long day. He had promised Emma a hot dog from the corner stand if she behaved during their grocery trip. Now they were taking a shortcut through the back alleys to get home faster. Marcus was 31 years old, but life had aged him beyond his years. 2 years ago, cancer had taken his wife quickly and cruelly. Since then, everything in his life revolved around Emma. He worked long hours fixing broken machines to keep food on the table and pay rent for their small third-floor apartment. Most days he smelled like rust and soap, but he never complained. As long as Emma had crayons, warm meals, and a safe place to sleep, nothing else mattered. Before becoming a repairman, Marcus had worn a different uniform. He had been a firefighter and paramedic, someone who ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. A long scar marked his left arm from the day he pulled a child from a burning building. But some memories were too painful to speak about. That little girl hadn't survived, and Marcus carried that weight every single day. He had quit the rescue service after his wife died, needing to focus entirely on Emma. Emma stirred in his arms as they walked. "Daddy, can we get rainbow sprinkles on our ice cream tomorrow?" she asked sleepily. Marcus smiled. "We'll see, honey. Maybe if you eat all your vegetables." Emma loved to draw. Their apartment walls were covered with her crayon pictures of flowers, rainbows, and stick figures holding hands. She always said that colors made things better, and Marcus believed her. They turned into the alley that would cut their walk home in half. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle. Street lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the brick walls. Then Marcus heard it. A scream. A woman's voice, trembling and desperate, begging for mercy. The sound pierced through the quiet night like a siren. Marcus stopped immediately. His old training kicked in without thought. Emma lifted her head. "Daddy, is she going to die?" she whispered, her small voice filled with worry. Marcus gently set Emma down on the ground. He looked into her eyes seriously. "Stay right here," he said firmly. Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. She knew that tone. It meant Daddy needed to help someone. Marcus stepped forward into the darker part of the alley. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. Through the rain he could see two figures. A man standing over a woman who lay crumpled on the ground. The woman's white suit was torn and filthy. She was holding something against her chest, protecting it. The man's fists were clenched and he was moving closer to her. Marcus's voice rang out, low and commanding. "Step away from her now." The attacker spun around, startled. For a moment, the two men locked eyes. Marcus didn't move. He didn't shout or threaten. He just stood there with an expression that was calm but absolutely certain. Something in that look, in those steady eyes, made the attacker hesitate. Marcus had faced down fires and collapsing buildings. One coward in an alley didn't scare him. The attacker took one step backward, then another. Then he turned and ran into the shadows, disappearing into the night. Marcus immediately rushed to the woman's side. Rachel blinked through her tears, unable to believe what had just happened. The man who had been about to hurt her was gone. In his place knelt a stranger with kind eyes and a calm voice. "You're safe," Marcus said softly. "I've got you." Rachel tried to speak, but no words came out. Her whole body shook, not just from pain but from shock. She had never felt so helpless in her entire life. Marcus quickly examined her ankle. Years of medical training told him it was badly sprained, possibly broken. "We need to get you somewhere warm," he said. "Can you tell me your name?" Rachel's lips trembled. "Rachel," she managed to whisper. Marcus nodded. "I'm Marcus. I'm going to carry you now, okay? We don't live far." Before she could protest, he lifted her carefully into his arms. Rachel gasped at first, then realized how gentle he was being. She still clutched the laptop against her chest. Little Emma appeared from around the corner, her eyes wide with concern. "Is the lady okay, Daddy?" Marcus gave his daughter a reassuring smile. "She's hurt, but she's going to be fine. We're taking her home." Emma walked beside them, occasionally looking up at Rachel with curious eyes. "Don't worry," the little girl said seriously. "My daddy fixes everything. He even fixed my favorite teddy bear 3 times. They walked through the quiet streets until they reached a crumbling apartment building. Marcus carried Rachel up 3 flights of stairs without stopping once to rest. His apartment was small but clean. Crayon drawings covered every wall. A worn couch sat in the living room next to a small television. Everything looked old but cared for. Marcus gently placed Rachel on the couch and wrapped a clean towel around her shoulders. "I'll make you some tea," Marcus said, disappearing into the tiny kitchen. Emma sat on the floor near Rachel, still holding her stuffed rabbit. She tilted her head, studying Rachel's face. "Why are you crying like me when I miss Mommy?" Emma asked innocently. The question hit Rachel like a punch to the chest. She turned her face away, trying to hide her tears. Marcus returned quickly. "She's had a hard day, honey," he explained gently to Emma. "Sometimes grown-ups cry too." Emma nodded solemnly, then wandered off to her bedroom. Marcus brought Rachel hot tea that smelled like ginger. "Drink this. It'll help with the pain." Rachel's hands shook as she lifted the cup. She had been in luxury spas and expensive hotels, but nothing had ever felt as comforting as this simple cup of tea in this modest apartment. She didn't understand why, but something about this place made her feel safe for the first time in years. That night, Rachel fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from fear and pain. When she woke in the darkness hours later, guilt flooded through her. She had invaded a stranger's home and disrupted his life. She had no right to be here. Quietly, she tried to stand, biting back a cry as her ankle throbbed. She limped toward the door, planning to disappear before morning came. But when she reached for her shoes, she stopped. They weren't wet anymore. Someone had carefully dried them and stitched up the loose sole with clean, deliberate lines. Next to them sat a folded towel, still warm. On top was a note in rough but steady handwriting. "Your foot's not better yet. You can stay. It's okay." Rachel stared at those words until they blurred. No conditions. No expectations. Just simple kindness from a stranger who owed her nothing. Rachel slowly sank to the floor, still holding the note in her trembling hands. All her life she had fought to prove herself worthy. She had worked endless hours to be smart enough, strong enough, and successful enough. In her world of glass towers and million-dollar deals, everything came with a price. But here, in this tiny apartment with creaking floorboards and crayon drawings on the walls, Someone had offered her kindness without asking for anything in return. The tears came suddenly and wouldn't stop. The next morning, Rachel woke to the sound of a kettle whistling in the kitchen. For a confused moment, she thought she was back in her penthouse with her staff preparing breakfast. Then she saw the worn couch beneath her and remembered everything. Marcus appeared carrying a steaming mug. He placed it on the small table beside her. "Drink this," he said calmly. "It'll help with the pain." Rachel sat up slowly, testing her injured ankle. The swelling had gone down a little, though it still throbbed terribly. She sipped the tea. It was spicy and strong, warming her from the inside. "You made this yourself?" she asked, surprised. Marcus nodded. "Old habit. Ginger tea, clean water, and steady hands. That's all it takes sometimes." Without another word, he gently lifted her foot onto his lap. Rachel watched as he carefully removed the old bandage, cleaned the wound, and wrapped it with fresh gauze. His touch was professional but gentle, never hurting her more than necessary. "You've done this before," Rachel said softly. Marcus nodded once. "Rescue work. Fires and accidents. You learn to stay calm even when you're falling apart inside." Rachel's eyes softened. She wanted to ask more questions, but before she could speak, Marcus reached for her torn jacket. He pulled out a small sewing kit from a shelf and began threading a needle. "You don't have to do that," Rachel protested weakly. Marcus looked up briefly. "I know, but it's worth fixing." The stitches were a little uneven and imperfect, but Marcus worked with such focus and care that something broke open inside Rachel's chest. The tears returned, unstoppable this time. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed of her weakness. Marcus paused immediately. "Did I hurt you?" he asked with concern. Rachel shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, I'm just not used to this. Being cared for." Marcus didn't push her to explain. He simply handed her a tissue and said quietly, "Everyone deserves it. Even you." Small footsteps pattered across the floor. Emma appeared in her star-covered pajamas, her hair in beautiful twists. She held a piece of paper tightly against her chest. Without any hesitation, the little girl walked over and placed it carefully in Rachel's lap. "This is for you," Emma announced proudly. Rachel unfolded the paper with shaking hands. It was a crayon drawing filled with bright colors. A tall man with brown skin stood next to a little girl in yellow shoes. Beside them was an empty outline of a woman. "Who is this?" Rachel asked, confused. Emma smiled and pointed at the empty figure. "That's you. I left that space empty for a long time, waiting for someone who belongs. I think it's supposed to be you now." Rachel's throat tightened. Her hands trembled as she stared at the drawing. "Sweetheart," she whispered, struggling to find words. "Why me?" Emma answered simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because you're here. And you look like someone who needs a family." Rachel pressed the drawing to her chest as tears spilled freely down her face. The sound that escaped her was half laugh, half sob. For so long, her life had been a battlefield of boardrooms, contracts, and impossible expectations. She had been defined by numbers, power, and appearances. Nobody had ever left a space for her. They only made demands about what she must become. Yet here, in this cramped apartment with peeling paint and the sound of a child's crayons scratching paper, she was being offered something she had never known. A place to belong. Days passed and Rachel's ankle slowly healed. Each morning brought a little more strength and a little less pain. But walking was still difficult. She hated feeling weak and needing help. However, Marcus never made her feel small because of it. He offered his arm without speaking, letting her lean on him as they moved through the apartment. When she stumbled, he steadied her. When she winced, he paused. There was no pity in his actions, just patience and presence. One sunny Saturday morning, Emma announced it was time to make pancakes. "Daddy makes them okay," she said with an exaggerated shrug. "But I bet Rachel makes them fancy." Rachel laughed. "I wouldn't count on it. I've never actually cooked anything myself." Emma's eyes grew wide with shock. "Never? Not even toast?" Rachel shook her head. "Nope. Not even toast." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's about to change today." They gathered in the small kitchen, elbows bumping as they mixed batter in a cracked ceramic bowl. Emma stood on a chair to reach the counter, giving orders like a professional chef. "More milk. Not too many eggs. And wait for the bubbles before you flip." Rachel tried her best to follow the directions, but her first pancake stuck to the pan. The second one folded in on itself. The third one somehow caught fire. Marcus quickly grabbed the pan off the burner, waving a dish towel at the thin trail of smoke. "I think that one's yours," he joked, nudging the blackened blob toward Rachel's plate. They all laughed. Real laughter that came from deep in their bellies, loud and free. It filled the kitchen like sunlight pouring through the windows. When they finally sat down to eat, the pancakes were uneven. Some were burnt and some were even raw in the middle. But Emma grinned as she took a big bite. "These are weird pancakes," she declared happily. "But weird is good." They ate slowly, letting golden light pour over the table. Outside, Chicago bustled with traffic and noise, but inside, time seemed to stop. Emma chattered about school, about how she almost won the spelling bee, about how her teacher wore socks with dogs on them. Then she said something that made both adults freeze. "I told my class that Rachel is my maybe new mom." Rachel's eyes met Marcus's across the table. He didn't react with shock or concern. He just reached over and poured more syrup onto Emma's plate, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. But their peaceful morning was shattered by a loud knock at the door. Then another knock, harder this time. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. He looked outside, then quickly closed the curtain. His face had changed. "Don't move," he said to Rachel, his voice suddenly serious. Rachel didn't need to ask why. Through the window, she had already seen the sleek black car parked on the street below. Her old world had found her. Within hours, more people arrived. A cameraman set up equipment on the sidewalk. A woman in a tight blazer held a microphone. A man wearing an expensive suit carried a briefcase full of legal documents. The street outside Marcus's apartment building became a circus. Neighbors peeked through their windows, whispering and pointing. Marcus stood by the door with his arms folded across his chest, blocking anyone from entering. From the bedroom, Emma's small voice called out nervously. "Why are all those people outside?" Rachel tried to keep her voice steady. "They're just lost, sweetheart. Don't worry." That evening, after the reporters grew tired and the knocking finally stopped, Rachel received a message on her laptop. It was from the company board. They offered her millions of dollars in new compensation, full control of her position again, and a team to rebuild her reputation. All she had to do was come back, sign the papers, smile for the cameras, and pretend none of the terrible things had happened. Rachel stared at the message for a long time. Then she closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen where Marcus stood drying dishes. "I'm not going back," she said firmly. Marcus didn't look up right away. "You sure about that?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Rachel answered. "I've been offered more money than I could ever spend. But not once in all those years did I wake up feeling like I do here." Marcus turned to face her, his eyes serious. "How do you feel here?" Rachel hesitated, then answered honestly. "Real. Safe." Marcus nodded once. That was all he needed to hear. Rachel knew what she had to do. She couldn't just disappear and let David win. She had to finish this the right way. A week later, Rachel returned to the company boardroom. She limped as she walked, her steps echoing unevenly from her healing ankle. She wore no designer gown or diamond jewelry, just a clean navy suit and fierce determination in her eyes. Every head turned when she entered. Whispers started immediately. She came back. What is she thinking? But nobody stopped her. David sat at the front of the room, smug and relaxed in the seat that once belonged to her. He smirked into the microphone. "Miss Morgan, how unexpected. I assumed you'd finally accepted your place off the board." Rachel didn't flinch. She walked straight to the center of the room and faced the crowd of shareholders and executives. Her voice was clear and strong. "I came back to finish this the right way." She tapped her laptop, and the large screens behind her lit up with evidence. Spreadsheets, emails, and confidential documents filled the screens, proving David's illegal activities and corruption. Gasps broke the silence. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rachel turned slowly, making eye contact with everyone in the room. "You thought I disappeared because I was weak. But I left because I needed space to remember who I was before you all convinced me I had to be someone else." David stood abruptly, trying to regain control. "This is reckless. Do you have any idea what this could cost you?" Rachel looked at him and finally saw how small he truly was. "I do," she said calmly. "And I'm ready to pay it." She pulled out a document and placed it on the table. "This is my formal resignation, effective immediately. I'm giving up my position, my shares, and every last piece of control you thought you had over me." The room fell completely silent. "You can keep your board seats and your empire built on fear," Rachel continued. "But I will no longer be part of it." One older woman who had mentored Rachel years ago leaned forward, her voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" Rachel's voice softened but grew even stronger. Because I am not a product. I'm not a brand. I am a person. David tried one last time. You'll regret this. You're throwing away everything. Rachel gave him one final look. No. I'm walking away from something that never truly belonged to me in the first place. She gathered her things with quiet grace. As she walked out, step by limping step, nobody dared stop her. When the elevator doors closed behind her, she didn't cry or tremble. She simply exhaled. Outside, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky amber and rose. Rachel stepped onto the sidewalk, not as a CEO, but as a woman who had finally chosen herself. When Rachel returned to the apartment, Marcus and Emma were on the small balcony, planting flowers in old containers. Their hands were covered in dirt. Rachel stood in the doorway watching them, her heart full. Do you have room for one more in this garden? She asked softly. Marcus looked up, his face bright with warmth. Always, he said. Emma ran to Rachel, dirt smudged on her cheek. We're planting orange flowers today. You can pick the next color. Rachel knelt and dug her hands into the earth with them. In that quiet moment of planting something new, she felt her own roots take hold. She wasn't just safe anymore. She was seen. She was loved. And this time it wasn't because she had power or money. It was because she had chosen to stay and they had chosen her in return. Sometimes family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build, one act of kindness at a time. Rachel had walked away from power and walked toward something real. A little girl who believed in her. A man who never asked her to be perfect. And a life where love didn't come with conditions, only choices. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us keep bringing you more stories. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next.